all, very good evening. Online students, am I audible? Let's start. Yesterday we were talking about gender stratification. So we have seen multiple theories. The last theory that we saw was radical feminist theory. Now there is another theory that was in contrast to radical feminist, a theory that was given by one of the most prominent scholar in anthropology. She is associated with symbolic school, Ortner. So what she says regarding gender stratification, she says yes, or she agrees with Firestone that yes, stratification is due to biology, but it's not actually due to biology, but the interpretation of biology. That when Firestone suggested in the idea of the biological family that stratification is because of female biology, and that female biology leads to dependence of female over male, and that creates superiority complex. But she's saying that yes, biology is there, but it's not the actual biology, but the interpretation of female biology. How a particular society interprets female biology. This is the reason that a particular society would lead to inferiority or kind of oppression of women compared to the men, or interpretation of biology of women makes women seem inferior to men. Now, why this interpretation of biology? So she is the one who gives the idea of, I have already talked about, nature is to culture is as woman is to men. So she says that in all the societies, nature culture distinction is there, and culture is considered superior to nature. Why? Because culture gives us the capability to exploit nature. Okay, that is, it's only the cultural capacity that we have gained, we are able to exploit. The tools that we have made out of culture gives us the capability to exploit nature, or we are able not just exploit, we are able to control nature or regulate nature by our cultural knowledge or capacities. Okay, so this is why every society views culture over and above nature. So इसमें women का role कैसे आ गया? So she says that every society views women closer to nature and men closer to culture, and that's why since culture is seen above nature, in the same way men are seen above or superior to women. Now, why women are seen closer to nature and men closer to culture? She says that first thing, because of the biological processes that women undergo, that is the capacity to give birth or menstruation. Only the nature has this capacity to reproduce, to give birth. So women, since she is engaging into these cycles, so she is seen closer to nature. Moreover, she is engaged in civilizing or socializing the young children. Now, these young children, if you remember Dr. Parsons' idea, is seen as a barbaric attack. Remember, the recurrent birth of a child is seen as a barbaric invasion on the society, and society is ready with the weapons of culture. So, since the young woman is kind of seen as or is involved in socialization of the young, so she is regularly interacting with the one who is closer to nature, that is child. वो culturally when the child is born, since he has not been socialized, so the child is also closer to nature, or kind of nature. वहाँ पे तो culture का कोई element ही नहीं है, right? So that's why since she is regularly engaging or interacting with an individual who is closer to nature, so definitely woman is closer to nature. First, and second one. The first one is the biological processes that she undergoes. Now she also says that since woman is confined to household, and that's why she is not engaging with any of the major institutions created by culture, the politics, religion, economics, because woman is confined to household, and that's why she seems closer to nature compared to culture. So the idea is it's not the biology, but the interpretation of biology that leads to stratification. And why interpretation of biology? That every society views culture superior to nature, and women closer to nature and men closer to culture. Okay. Why women is seen closer to nature? Because of her biology, that processes that she experiences. Okay, giving birth, that is a capacity only nature has, that is to reproduce. Second, her activities that she performs, engaging with socialization of a savage or socialization of an uncivilized child. So she is interacting with nature more than any man, and that's why more closer to nature. Also, her activities in the household keeps her distant from the cultural institutions, religion, economics, politics. Okay, and that's why again closer to nature. And since she is closer to nature, she is seen as inferior to men who are closer to culture. Clear है? Just like this. Yes. Culture decide तो कर रहा है, but the thing is कि जो major cultural institutions हैं, religion, politics, economics, all these are basically isolated from women. वो जो भी काम कर रही हैं in the household, here she is engaging with majority of the people. She is kind of isolated from the cultural interactions जो घर के बाहर होते, अगर वो बाकी लोगों से interact कर रही होती. Okay, so वहाँ पे child के socialization में काम कर रही है, तो वहाँ पे basically the child is also a part of nature, या उसके पास भी कोई culture नहीं है, so definitely she is interacting more with a savage person. तो nature के close है. I'm not saying कि वो completely nature वाले हैं, उनमें culture नहीं है. They are closer to nature compared to men who are closer to culture side. ठीक है, just like this. According to Ortner, all women are universally oppressed. All women are universally oppressed and devalued. However, she claims that it is not the biology. It is not the biology that ascribes women low status in society. It's not the biology that ascribes women low status in the society, but the way in which every culture defines and elaborates biology. Next point. Ortner argued that in every society a higher value is placed on culture than on nature. Culture is the means by which humanity controls and regulates nature. Women are seen closer to nature. Women are seen closer to nature than men, and therefore inferior to men. and therefore inferior to men. Next point. Ortner argued that women are universally defined closer to nature. Women are universally defined closer to nature because of their body experience, like pregnancy, childbirth, etc. Moreover, they are primarily responsible for care and socialization of young children, who are seen as less cultured and therefore closer to nature. Okay. Now this idea actually was criticized by a scholar. The name of the scholar is Stephanie Kuntz. This scholar says that what Ortner is saying, the nature culture distinction is there in every society and culture will be seen as superior to nature in every society. But first idea, that the distinction of nature culture, and the second idea, seeing culture superior to nature, it is not universal. However, patriarchy is kind of nearly universal. Okay. Women inferiority or women suppression or subordination is nearly a universal phenomena, but this distinction of society or distinction of cultural elements into nature and culture and seeing culture superior to nature is not there. So Stephanie Kuntz talks about a society in Africa, that is Sherbo. So they say that children are seen closer to nature, but both the sex are seen closer to culture. At the same time, there is no hierarchy between culture and nature. तो फिर वहां पे आप patriarchy को कैसे explain करोगे? Are you getting this idea? कि the distinction of nature culture plus hierarchy between nature culture is not universal, but the phenomena of patriarchy is more or less universal. So you are trying to explain something that is universal by an idea which is not present in every society. So how will you explain this nature culture distinction and ideology in such societies, or patriarchy in such societies? Is it clear? Just like this. According to Stephanie Kuntz, the distinction between nature culture and hierarchy between nature culture, is not universal. For example, in Sherbo of West Africa, children are seen closer to nature. But adults of both the sex are seen closer to culture. Similarly, among Haitianers, this is the community Haitianers of Papua New Guinea, distinction between culture and nature is present. Among Haitianers of Papua New Guinea, distinction between culture and nature is present, but they do not rank one over other. Okay. Next column, the last theory, that is Michelle Z. Rosaldo. So what she says is that it's a kind of similar idea, but not based on nature culture, but idea based on domestic versus public sphere. She says that initial time, what actually happened, that the role of women or division of labor happened in such a way that women dominated the domestic spheres of life and men dominated the public sphere of life. So domestic sphere was dominated by women and men dominated public sphere. But as the culture got complex, what actually happened, that this public sphere institution like religion, polity, economy also started to dominate or control the institution of domestic spheres, and that led to dominance of men over women. That initially it was simply a sheer practicality that women will be doing or controlling the domestic sphere, because remember the expendability theory and all that theory. So women are more suitable for the domestic sphere because of compatibility with childcare, and expendability theory, that is men are more expendable than women. So women got the domestic sphere and men took up the public sphere. Whatever work would take them away from home, they will be doing, that will be done by men. But later on, these public sphere institutions like religion, polity, economy, they started controlling over the institution of domestic sphere. The family, how large should be the family and how the family should behave, okay, how the woman is supposed to behave or how the family members are supposed to behave and interact. And since it was controlled by men, okay, so they started dominating over the domestic sphere and hence over women. Is it clear? But the question comes, or there are several scholars who say that if this is the case, why the women who participate in public sphere also do not get equal respect as men? अगर ऐसा होता, so wherever the women are participating into public sphere, they should get the equal respect. But why this is not happening? So it's not inherently who is controlling public sphere that is responsible for the stratification, but it's specifically related to sex only. So the women will be controlling the public spheres, they should get equal respect or they should be treated superior to men. But that is not happening. Even in matrilineal societies also, the power still lies in the hand of male. अवंकु potestality, right? So how will you explain this? So the question comes कि हर theory के अपने shortcomings हैं. They are just telling you one dimension over other that this might be the reason, but we do not have a single theory that actually explains what might be the sole reason for universality of patriarchy in almost all the societies or cultures in the world. Okay? That there is very few, or not just patriarchy or male dominance. Even if there is matrilineality, the male dominance is universal. So there is no single theory that would explain the dominance of male over female. But yes, these are some of the dimensions that we actually covered. So आप ये लिख लो, Rosaldo argued that women's subordination was a consequence of division between public and private world, or domestic and public sphere. The domestic sphere included institutions. And modes of activities that are organized immediately around one or more mothers and their children. They were related to family and life at home. Public sphere. Next point. Public sphere refers to activities and institutions related to religion, politics, and economy. Men dominated the province of public sphere. Rosaldo argues that as a consequence of men's involvement in religious and political life, they exercise power over domestic units which are focus of women's life, or which are focused on women's life. Okay. Just like, however, women's activity tend to be devaluated even when they take place in public sphere. When women takes paid employment, they are regarded as being less important than those of men. Okay. Now, just a side topic, that why political leadership all across the world is basically male dominated. There is a male dominance of political leadership all across the world. It's a very side topic, not related to stratification per se, but just there might be a 10-mark question. So it's said that it is actually the reason for this is actually the involvement of men in warfare. So since men are controlling warfare more than the women, they will become important politically. Why? Because warfare is necessary for survival. Okay, and the one who will be doing warfare, or who will be participating into warfare, will be controlling the resources which will provide success in warfare, specifically two resources: weapon and food. These two resources आपको army को provision देना पड़ेगा, and second is weapons. And that's why the one who will be participating in warfare will have more knowledge about it and will be the decision maker. जिसने कभी war में participate नहीं किया, how can he decide when the war should happen or how the war should be fought? So are you able to understand this? कि men, the one warfare is necessary for survival of the community. The one who will be participating into warfare will be controlling the resources, the weapon and the food. And second, the warfare में जो participate करेगा उसके पास knowledge होगी तो decision making भी वही करेगा. अब question आता है कि men क्यों warfare में participate करेंगे? So we have the three theories. The most prominent one, the expendability theory. कि men are more expendables. इस वजह से it's like practical for men to participate in warfare, because life and death of men will not be reproductively disadvantageous for the entire group as compared to death of women. Or child care compatibility theory, or the third theory is the energy theory. Right? The energy चाहिए warfare में, physical energy, so men are having more energy, that's why it's easy to participate, or it's practical for men to participate in war. And since men are participating, so automatically what happens? They start controlling the resources. First one the weapons, the second one the food. And also since men are participating, due to greater knowledge, they will become the decision makers, and that's why political leadership goes to men. Clear? Then there are certain other ethnographic studies that says that political leadership is usually ascribed to a person who have greater height. Okay, so greater height means ये ethnographic study, it's not something a law you can say greater height होगी तो political leadership होगी, but majority societies it was seen that the person with a greater height was automatically perceived as a leader. Okay, so greater height, and definitely compared to men and women, men do have certain genetics that provides them greater height than women. Okay, so this is one of the reasons. Then another reason that comes is since women basically were confined, means as women or as the societies moved from hunting gathering to agriculture, they started living settled life, and due to this settled life, what happened that women's activities were confined more closer to home compared to when they were living as hunter gatherers. So women were also engaged in gathering, they will be collecting fruits and seeds and nuts, all that. So due to this movement away from home, women were having a lot of knowledge about the nearby environment, which reduced drastically when they settled. जब घर के बाहर ज्यादा दूर तक जा नहीं रही हैं, so they are not getting to know a lot of things around their house. So एक particular area, एक territory को, who will be the one who will be leading it? The one who has greater knowledge of that territory. जिसको उस territory की knowledge ही नहीं होगी. Why or how he or she will be leading that territory? Are you getting this idea? So that knowledge of territory reduced drastically as there was a shift from hunting gathering to agriculture because women activities were confined nearby household. And जिसकी वजह से women का घर से बहुत ज्यादा दूर तक जाना was reduced significantly. And this was seen even among certain tribes, for example, Click Kungs. It was found that when this, ठीक है, I know आप लोगों को sound पता है. So it was found that when they started living a sedentary life, the status of women reduced significantly, which was egalitarian. But the moment they started living a sedentary life or shifted towards plantation or cultivation, the status of women in this community reduced significantly. And the reason you can understand is that since men were moving away from the house, they had a greater knowledge of their local territory and were in a better position to dominate or to lead the people and or to take some decisions which are related to mobility or territory or something like that. क्योंकि women को ज़्यादा territory का idea ही नहीं है because of sedentary lifestyle. Okay, or it was seen that due to sedentary lifestyle, childbearing capacity of the women also increased in certain tribes. जिसकी वजह से the ability of women to move was also reduced significantly. She cannot move with multiple childs, right? In this case also the knowledge about that local territory declined significantly, and since men were having more knowledge over the local territory, so they became the decision makers related to anything that is related to territory. Okay, so this is the basic idea. Just write this short note. In more than 87% societies, women never participate in public sphere or war. Even in matrilineal societies, men usually occupy political positions. Like some scholars suggest that men's role in warfare gives them edge in all kinds of political leadership, particularly because they control weapon and food. Next point, warfare affects survival and occurs regularly in most primitive societies. Therefore, decision making about war would be done by the person who knows most about it. In bracket write by participation. Who knows most about it? In bracket by participation. ठीक है. Next point, male, due to several factors, are more suitable to participate in warfare. You can write energy theory, जो हम लोगों ने पहले पढ़ा है, energy theory, expendability theory, and compatibility of childcare theory. These three theories जो हम लोगों ने कल पढ़ी थी. Okay, right. Next heading. Two other factors may be involved in dominance of male in politics. First, greater height of men. Studies by anthropologists suggest that taller persons are more likely to be the leaders. So this study was done by, you can write it in bracket, no need to remember, but just in case, Dennis Werner by Kayapos, studied on Kayapos tribe in Brazil. Dennis Werner. Second point, men's activities typically take them away from home, while women tend to work more around home. This gives men a greater knowledge of local territory, which acts to their advantage. This gives men a greater knowledge of local territory, which acts to their advantage. For example, Click Kung bands that settled down recently and where women no longer engaged in gatherings saw a deep decline in influence of women in decision making process. So this is about the gender stratification. जीन मेमोरी क्या? नहीं वो तो अरे ये सब तो हाइपोथेसिस है, these are not theories. तो अब मतलब आप वैसे भी डायरेक्शन के बारे में कैसे आप बताओगे कि मतलब नहीं गैदरर्स आल्सो हैड गुड नॉलेज ऑफ द टेरिटरी कलर्स बट टेरिटरी की नॉलेज तो थी द डायरेक्शन और स्पीड और टाइम का जो आइडिया था दैट वाज मोर इन मेन बिकॉज दे वर ट्रैकिंग अ मूविंग ऑब्जेक्ट okay कि एक एनिमल है who is moving at a very fast speed so in that case they have to track it they have to hunt it down maybe by bow and arrow or maybe by trapping it so इस वजह से उनको स्पीड डायरेक्शन ये सब का डायरेक्शन इन द सेंस कि sometimes you see कि जो क्रिकेट में आपने देखा होगा कि I'm not making a chauvinistic male statement but I'm just trying to compare male and female cricket so you'll see that when the fielder from the boundary throws a throw means taken to the wicket so you'll find that male cricket में it is very common to hit the stumps but that is very मतलब it's celebrated as a feat when any female fielder does it okay जैसे कि अभी इंडिया में that हरमनप्रीत और नहीं हरमनप्रीत क्या नाम है उसका हरमनप्रीत कौर यस उसका एक थ्रो और एक जो कैच लिया था उसने और फिर एक थ्रो किया था हरलिन देओल सो दैट वाज आल्सो सेलिब्रेटेड वेरी मच अब ऐसे तो अगर आप मेल क्रिकेट में देखोगे तो एवरी डे मतलब ऑलमोस्ट एवरी मैच में 2-3 बार ऐसे शॉट्स हो जाते हैं ओके द थिंग इज कि अगर एंथ्रोपोलॉजिकली एक्सप्लेन करोगे तो एवोल्यूशनरली दिस वाज हाउ द मेल फिजियोलॉजी और एनाटॉमी वाज कंडीशनड एंड हाउ द फीमेल एनाटॉमी वाज कंडीशनड एंड दैट्स व्हाई इट्स मोर लाइक अ फीट फॉर द वुमेन एज कंपेयर्ड टू समथिंग दैट्स अ नॉर्मल फिनोमेना इन मेल क्रिकेट ओके प्लीज डोंट टेक इट एज मैं किसी भी तरीके से ये जस्टिफाई कर रहा हूं बट इट्स लाइक एन एंथ्रोपोलॉजिकल एक्सप्लेनेशन टू इट दैट आवर एवोल्यूशनरी एक्सपीरियंसेस वर वेरी मच डिफरेंट एंड दैट्स व्हाई आवर बॉडीज वर कंडीशनड इन अ वेरी डिफरेंट मैनर so some advantages grew in women that is greater perception of color or deep identification of color while other advantages were with men so some part of the senses grew more better in men compared to women okay now the next stratification that is ethnicity so what is ethnicity so this ethnicity term you can say although was used very early or it's a very old term but the meaning of this term has changed significantly as several humanitarian disciplines started to evolve so initially it was usually referred to a group of people who were united by race don't write this just listen but later on at this point of time it has nothing to do with race race आप समझ लो कि that is distinction of people based on biological features that is what is called as race we'll study race later on in much detail but simply when we talk about race as a layman idea so it's simply the distinction between people based on biological features maybe color skin color or some other biological features but initially ethnicity was used to represent race but later on this idea of ethnicity evolved with time and multiple definitions and multiple ideas of ethnicity started to come up so this word ethnicity is derived from the word ethnos which broadly meant people or nation now have I talked about nation and state idea kabhi bhi huh okay so here when I'm saying nation or the term state although we use it in normal terms we are using this term interchangeably that India is a nation and or India is a state whatever but these two terms have two very different meaning in anthropology or sociology per se so nation means a group of people that is bounded by some shared cultural experiences will be there at the same time they are politically aware I'm getting a feeling I have talked about this I might have given the example of Khalistan and all शर्म करो यार तुम लोग रिवाइज नहीं करते so nation refers to a group of people having shared cultural experiences who are politically aware so the state it's a sorry nation is a cultural term or it's a cultural entity while state is a political entity that is when a group of people are sovereign and have a territory of its own sovereign territory of its own is called as a state and sometimes this nation might have a sovereign territory of its own for example a group of people having shared cultural experiences they live in the same territory Japan it's a nation state that means shared culture politically aware with a sovereign territory but there can be certain nation without state like Khalistan it's a nation group of people who are having shared cultural experiences politically aware but without a territory of its own so they are nation and there is a state that is there might be culturally different people living in a sovereign territory that's a state but when culturally identical people politically aware live in a sovereign territory they are called as nation state so there can be a nation without state there can be state without nation or there can be both nation state so supposedly like for example this Kurds they are nation and they are demanding state कि उनको state demand करे and suppose someday if this happens or this Baloch they are nation demanding a state so suppose in future if because of Ajit Doval something like this happen and Pakistan का एक और partition हो and Balochistan might be declared as an independent country so then Balochistan according to anthropological terminology will be nation state group of people with shared cultural identity having a sovereign territory of its own अभी फिलहाल के लिए it's a nation only cultural experience and politically aware ये clear है what's a nation what's a state and what's a nation state so India क्या है it's a nation it's a state or it's a nation state क्या पहले तो बहुत ज्यादा नेशन स्टेट टाइप बताने से ओके सिंपल सा आइडिया है एक ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल विद शेयर्ड कल्चर पॉलिटिकल अवेयरनेस दे आर नेशन अब उसके पास टेरिटरी नहीं है अपनी अभी सिर्फ वो पॉलिटिकली अवेयर ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल विद शेयर्ड कल्चर कल्चरल एक्सपीरियंसेस ठीक है तो दिस इज अ नेशन सपोज इफ दिस नेशन समडे गेट्स अ टेरिटरी ऑफ इट्स ओन तो इट्स अ नेशन स्टेट और स्टेट मतलब सिंपली अ ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल हैविंग सॉवरेन टेरिटरी तो नेशन माइट बिकम नेशन स्टेट तो खालिस्तान कनाडा में रेफरेंडम करा रहा है वहीं पे स्टेट बनाएगा ओके तो एक नया स्टेट वहीं निकलने वाला है बहुत जल्दी कनाडा का पार्टीशन होगा तीन चार सिटीज ऑलरेडी आइडेंटिफाई कर चुके हैं डोमिनेंस पूरा है तो समडे इट विल हैपन श्योर एंड हम लोग को शायद वीजा लेने की जरूरत भी नहीं पड़ेगी वहां जाने के लिए एकदम ऑन अराइवल वीजा so or maybe Kurds maybe Baloch this might happen okay in future and this territories would become nation state India if we see it's not a country or it's not a territory that is occupied by people following same culture okay and that's why it's a state but post 2014 it's on the path to become a nation okay state on the path to become a nation because of the homogeneity that is kind of being imposed. Or I'm not saying it in a very negative sense, but I'm telling you that the journey of India that is happening now, and in many ways this is a good thing also, in many ways, because many of the developed countries except USA are developed only and only because they respect and they value their cultural heritage very much. Okay, and this cultural heritage, they are connected to it, but due to several invasions, what actually happened, we started, some part of our culture was valued more over the other parts of our culture. Okay, and also not just valued or valuation happened, we were actually socialized in such a way, our education system was designed in such a way that we started feeling stigmatized by identifying with our culture. That feeling of stigma that was created due to British rule, when you are identifying with your culture, that colonial mindset of that colonial hangover is something that has to be removed. So any nation, Japan, Japan was able to rise even after 2 nuclear attacks or atom bombs were dropped. It's only because of their cultural heritage and the value that they placed on cultural heritage. And इसकी वजह से they were able to create that solidarity and that feeling of, आप समझोगे कि जब आपके cultural heritage homogenize हो जाते हैं, तो then all the subordinate loyalties will become irrelevant. The loyalty towards region, language, caste, all that will become irrelevant, and only the supra loyalties or the biggest, larger identity will become relevant. That is the identity of the nation. So no Japanese would identify himself to a particular clan or something like that. But whenever the question comes of Japanese or Japanese growth or something like that, every Japanese would contribute because they identify to their nation. Okay, and that was the reason that Japan actually was able to overcome the devastating effects of 2 nuclear attacks or 2 atom bombs. Same is the case with Germany also. After so much of loss in Second World War, this German identity, it was able to rise. Switzerland, कोई resource नहीं है उसके पास, ठीक है, no resources, but still having one of the highest per capita income and almost a top performance in almost all the global indexes. It's because of a nation state identity, that is a uniform culture and people feeling proud of their cultural heritage. So आप देखो कि this idea of nation state is the reason that एक गांव की एक bottle of liquor is sold at thousands of dollars or say lakhs of dollars. Champagne, it's a drink that was made in some village of Europe in France, ठीक है, एक गांव का नाम है, एक लिकर, देसी लिकर है वो, और उस देसी दारू को पूरी दुनिया में एक ब्रांडेड लिकर की तरह बेचा गया, and it is seen as a status symbol. And there is a bidding also, means almost जितने बड़े games और जितने बड़े events happen, champagne opening up with the champagne is seen as a status symbol. So it's only because of this cultural identity with the nation, और मतलब आपकी heritage के साथ आपकी identity है, and that's why they were able to market their product something like this. और उसके लिए bidding हो रही है, और उसके लिए people are like paying any amount, they are ready to pay any kind of amount. Okay, so I hope this nation state idea is clear कि nation क्या है, state क्या है, nation state क्या है. it's related to, you can say, the Vedic culture, जहां से सब originate करता है. Great connection is there. ठीक है, आप संगम लिटरेचर को पढ़ोगे. Yes, if you read Sangam literature, or if you, also I have not read it, but the thing is, कि Sangam literature में there are several instances that connect, that clearly show a lot of similarities between Dravidian languages and Sanskrit. Also, several instances that shows that they were not, they do not belong to different linguistic families, but they are connected to each other. Okay, although it might be said कि हो सकता है कि the Vedic, मतलब that debate might come up कि Vedic literature was older or say Sangam literature older है या उसकी hierarchy and all that. That is not a step. But the thing is कि अभी दोनों ही आप accept कर लो, कोई बात नहीं. Not a common culture. ठीक है, चलो आप संगम को भी, साउथ में आप संगम को accept कर रहे हो and नॉर्थ में आप Vedic culture को accept कर रहे हो. The problem is when we discard our culture or when we feel stigmatized, when somebody is talking about our ancient culture, or somebody actually wants to profess the ancient culture. So in that case, you are made to feel like you are very orthodox, traditional ho, yeah, conservative ho, something like this, and identifying oneself with the British values or Western values is seen to be a sign of progress or modernization. That should be discarded. Okay, now, so here ethnicity is point from the term ethno, that means nation or a group of people having shared cultural experiences, and that is what is meaning of ethnicity. Okay, that is a group of people having shared cultural experiences. Here, this ethnic group, जब अपनी ethnic identity को express करता है, that phenomena is actually called as ethnicity. A ethnic group, that is a group of people having shared cultural experience, when it expresses its ethnic identity, it is called as, this phenomena is called as ethnicity. But does all the group of people having shared ethnic identity always express ethnic identity? It is, in the present context, it is believed that it is only when they feel marginalized, or it's only when they feel deprived, relatively deprivation की feeling आती है, then the ethnic identity starts to surface. Without the feeling of that relative deprivation, ethnic identity usually does not surface out. वो लोग अपनी identity को दिखाना नहीं चाहते, that remains subsurface. But any moment that group feels that they are being deprived, maybe because economically, politically, or socially, that ethnic identity will start to surface up. Okay, and that ethnic identity will be used to mobilize the people against the current regime or current administration. Okay, just like this. Ethnicity is derived from the word ethnos, meaning nation. It refers to socially defined category of people who identify with each other based on common ancestral, social, cultural, or natural experience. Ethnic identity typifies ethnic identity typifies creative response of a group who consider themselves as marginalized in the society, Okay. So there are several scholars. We'll see one scholar, that is Frederick Barth. So Frederick Barth is associated with an idea called as ethnic boundaries. He was actually a student of Edmund Leach. Okay, and if you remember Edmund Leach a bit, so in that case, Edmund Leach was the one who was talking about oscillating equilibrium. So he says, he uses this idea of oscillating equilibrium to explain ethnic boundaries. He suggests that first thing, that ethnic boundaries are necessary for ethnic identity to express. That means you have to delineate where this group starts and where this group ends. What's the membership of that group? What's the criteria for membership of that group? Only then you will be able to create a group. If a boundary nahi hai, then how will you identify one group distinct from the other group? So there has to be a distinct boundary. However, this boundary is kind of flexible or fluid in nature. इसका मतलब क्या है? That we have multiple ethnic identities. So somebody can be Bihari, Rajput, or a Hindu. Okay. So where this boundary will be created depends upon who is the person opposite to me. So if the person is a Muslim, then Hindu identity, the boundary will be related to. If the person is a Marathi, then Bihari identity will come up. Or if the person is, say, Brahmin, Bhumiyar, then Rajput identity might surface up. But boundaries are necessary. That will create a distinction between one ethnic group and the other ethnic group. So boundaries होना जरूरी है, and that boundaries are determined by the circumstances. कि externally कौन आपके सामने खड़ा है, because of multiple ethnic identity that an individual holds in the society. Complementary opposition idea, yes, kind of. So here, if you see this, so there are scholars like Ortner and Gellerstein. So Gellner and Wallerstein, sorry. So they say that as the modernity will start increasing, okay, due to modernization, this ethnic identity will get weakened. Ethnic identity धीरे-धीरे weak होती जाएगी, because whatever purpose this ethnic identity is serving you, the state will do the same for you. Modernity बढ़ रही है, state will take care of the basic needs. Country will be developing. You will be getting like good healthcare resources, education, employment, and standard of living will be good. In that case, nobody will feel deprived. In that case, this ethnic identity will start to decline, and state loyalty की तरफ या greater larger identity की तरफ आप move करोगे due to modernity and due to development. But then there is a scholar Habermas who suggests that opposite would happen. Whenever modernity and globalization, all these kind of forces starts to expand, then ethnic identity tries to revive itself, because a particular cultural group will face a threat on its existence. उसको लगेगा कि homogeneity हो रही है globalization की वजह से. My cultural identity is under threat, and that's why all these cultural groups who feel that their cultural identity is getting threatened, they will start to revive it. They will now use this cultural identity to mobilize the people, or they will basically try to maintain some distance. They will try to promote their cultural heritage. क्योंकि उनको लग रहा है कि cultural identity might be gone or might be lost, and that's why they will revive it, or revival movement will start to happen. Okay, just like this. According to Frederick Barth, boundary is an important criteria. According to Frederick Barth, boundary is an important criteria for self-definition, or declaration by ethnic group. It is to separate themselves from others. According to Kellner and Wallerstein, merit-based modern society will dissipate any division on basis of ethnicity. People will associate to broader nation. Next point. However, as per Habermas, ethnicity becomes more prominent in modern times to prevent itself from drastic changes. Modernization creates anxiety. Among ethnic groups, as they fear that they might lose their unique cultural identity. This would promote revivalist tendencies among them. Okay. So now we'll see actually this ethnicity and ethno-nationalism and ethnic violence, something like that. These are the topics that we are supposed to read in paper 2 Tribal India. But here we'll be looking at ethnicity and the stratification related to it. Okay. Ethnic identity, violence, nationalism, integration, and all that stuff. There are a lot of theories explaining it. Just to give you a brief idea, that is 3 major types of theories are there. First one is ethnicity as innate in nature. That is the theory that was given by Clifford Geertz, who says that ethnicity comes by birth only. So by birth we are identified with some kind of ethnic identity. That is, this theory is called as primordial theory of ethnicity. So in that case, जो भी हमारे birth के time पे हमें innate identity मिल जाती है, that becomes or that are the ethnic identities. And ethnic violence is because of historical experiences or historical animosity between two ethnic groups. कि past में बहुत सारी tension रही होगी ethnic group में, वही ethnic violence में surface करती है. But this is something that is not able to explain the violence between Biharis and Marathis. There is no incidence of historical animosity. There was no historical past of like that. So इस वजह से primordial theory that was prevalent in 1960s and 70s. So there is a very famous statement that says man is not irrational but a national animal. Okay, that is to support this idea of ethnicity as a primordial identity. That means we all have a tendency to have a ethnic identity. हम लोग बहुत ज़्यादा attach करते हैं उसके साथ. We do crave for it. Okay, and on the basis of which the scholar suggested that man is not irrational but a national animal. That there has to be, or we crave for this ethnic identities, and that's why we are ready to sacrifice anything for our ethnic identities. We are easily ready to mobilize ourselves, or we easily get mobilized on the ethnic identities. And this, why this theory was primordial was very prevalent because of 1950s and 60s was the time when third world nations were getting independence. Okay? So there were several scholars, sociologists and anthropologists who were saying that these nations, third world nations, will never be or will be divided into several nation states, smaller nation states, because of the historical animosity between multiple ethnic groups living in these nations. They will never be able to remain united. But this idea failed significantly. The best example is India. So several obituaries of India were already written before India got independence. उसके पैदा होने से पहले ही उसके शोक संदेश पहले लिख दिए गए. That India is a failed experiment or India is going to be a failed experiment. That was written for India. But today, अब देखो कल ब्रिटेन के एक मिनिस्टर को रिजाइन करना पड़ गया इंडिया के बारे में बोली तो कुछ भी कहो मोदी जी का पावर तो है. ओके, एंड जयशंकर नहीं, एक दो मिनिस्टर अच्छे हैं, बढ़िया है. नितिन गडकरी गुड मिनिस्टर, सुषमा स्वराज वेरी गुड मिनिस्टर. ठीक है, अब बताओ यूके के मिनिस्टर को रिजाइन करना, इतना पावर आ गया कि इंडिया में पीएम बनने वाला वहाँ का. ठीक है, अब क्या पता वहाँ पे बीजेपी इंटरनेशनल शुरू हो जाए. कंजर्वेटिव माइट बी नेम्ड एज बीजेपी की बी विंग, जो यूके में काम कर रही है. तो जस्ट अपोजिट माइट हैपन देयर कि पहले ब्रिटेन रूल्ड इंडिया एंड देन अरे पता नहीं है कि ऋषि सुनक इंडिया का दामाद हो जाएगा सीधे. इन्फोसिस नारायण मूर्ति का दामाद है वो, तो ऑटोमेटिकली इंडिया का दामाद हो गया वो. ओके, तो दिस इज मतलब यूके ससुराल भी हो जाएगा इंडिया का फिर. हाँ, वो भी हो सकता है. ठीक है, तो क्या बात कर रहे थे हम लोग. हाँ, so primordial identity वाली, that primordial theories, they were given in this context, 1950s, when several third world nations were rising up, and they were basically saying that these third world nations will be a failed experiment because there are multiple ethnic groups living in that third world nations, and they definitely have historical animosity, and they will, and actually this somewhat it was true also because India did not have a very pleasant start. Okay, that started with partition, and that was based on historical animosity between two groups or two religions. India Pakistan happened, and then that historical animosity also led to partition of Pakistan and Bangladesh. Okay, so all these were actually strengthening the theory that historical animosity between ethnic groups will never lead them or will never make them live together as a nation. Their ethnic identities will surface up, and that will lead to dissolution of the state into several ethnic. Or India maybe what demands were also there before India was integrated. Or you must have read this post independence में, or you will be reading it, the role of Patel in integration of states. और आप लोगों ने अगर टाइम मिले तो वो प्रधानमंत्री वाली सीरीज देख लो. That's a very good, very informative series and that will help you in post independence. 20-22 एपिसोड्स है. इवन अभी नए एपिसोड शूट हुए तो आप वो देख लो. That's a very good series and आपको you will remember entire post independence by heart. आपको याद करने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी. Most of the questions of post independence India you can solve and it's very interesting also. ठीक है, so this was the time when primordial approach was being supported, but later on this primordial approach actually was disregarded or it was kind of sidelined, and there were some other approaches which is called as instrumentalist approach. What does this instrumentalist approach suggest? It says that the ethnic identity is an instrument to a particular end. That means it is used for particular end. अब वो end क्या है? तो that end might be some kind of political economic advantage. So people will be mobilized using ethnic identity, or they will be using ethnic identity only and only if they want some kind of political economic advantage. So leaders will be using ethnic identity to mobilize the people, and this mobilization will help them gain some economic or political advantages. So it's not that there is some historical animosity जिसकी वजह से, but depending on the circumstances, which ethnic identity gives you the most advantage, you will be using it to gain political and economic advantage. So this is what is called as instrumentalist approach. Later on, what happened? The question came, if this is the case, so how will you explain the means some leader is going to gain some power, some leader is going to gain some advantage, but how will you explain the participation of masses? Why would they sacrifice their life? उनको क्या मिल रहा है? So that actually led to modification of this approach called as constructivist approach. They say that both leader and the masses gain. Not just the leader will be gaining, but also the masses will gain. Because if the leader from one's community becomes gets a position, the entire mass will get the advantage of it. ठीक है, वो उनको accessibility to resource, accessibility to jobs, accessibility to a lot of other things are better than any other community. So that's why ethnic identity के basis पे mobility becomes a kind of advantageous aspect. So we'll see this is how ethnicity and several ethnic identities started to emerge in post-independence India. For example, region, language, religion, caste. These were major ethnic identities that surfaced post-independence. Why? Because they were instrument for certain political or economic ends. And sometimes this led to rise of autonomy, demands of autonomy, statehood की demand दे दो. And sometimes it also led to secessionist movements. The entire nation should be created or a new country should be created, for example, in Northeast. And in the initial years in South India also, Dravidistan demand also came up. Okay, so that is how ethnic identities were utilized to gain some social, political, economic gains. So now we'll talk about the stratification. This is something that we'll read in more detail in paper 2. So social stratification, how ethnicity would actually lead to, or how ethnic stratification is explained. The first approach is functionist perspective. How functionist perspective actually explains the ethnicity-based stratification in a society. So functionist है तो they will explain it as positively functional, और ये जरूरी है society में. तो कैसे explain करेंगे? Very interesting explanation. They say that if there is a society with multiple ethnic groups, So there is a chance that there will be ethnic conflicts. Okay, अगर एक society में multiple cultural groups रह रहे हैं, तो there is a greater chance that there will be clashes between them. So in that case, it is the solution to prevent this clash is that assimilation should happen. Okay, अब assimilation के लिए motivate कैसे करें? So they say ranking will motivate. That place the dominant ethnic group at the top, so that the minority groups they are at the lower rank and they have an incentive to assimilate to the top group. Okay, जिससे क्या होगा कि assimilation बढ़ेगा, cultural clashes will go away or it will not happen. So in order to promote assimilation, which is necessary for a society to survive, so that the multiple ethnic identities go away, so the ranking has been created, so people have an incentive to copy the culture of the dominant ethnic groups. And this assimilation से क्या होगा कि एक ही culture आ जाएगा, homogenization will happen and the cultural clashes will be prohibited. Okay, is it clear? Just write this. Functionist perspective. Functionist perspective believes that difference between racial and ethnic groups are largely cultural. The solution to prevent any cultural clash is assimilation. A process whereby minority group imitates the culture of dominant group and lose their original distinct identity. Next line. Assimilation is said to allow a society to maintain its equilibrium. If all the members of society voluntarily accept or adopt the dominant culture. ठीक है, similar, yes, very similar. Or you can say sensitization is a form of assimilation. Next one is the Marxist perspective. So Marxist perspective is simple. We have already said that ethnic stratification is on the basis of one who controls means of production. But how Marxist perspective here explain ethnicity stratification? They say that it's a tool that has been created by the capitalist class to divide the labor into multiple ethnic groups so that they can never unite together and revolt against the capitalist class. So labor को बहुत सारे ethnic group में divide कर दिया so that they cannot unite. So laborers are also, for example, I was in Nestle, I was placed in Pantnagar plant. So वहाँ पे मैगी बनती है, but हमारे means almost every factory there had two labor union. So you must means it was a very strange phenomenon because I have heard about labor union and all that stuff, but I never saw two labor union actually in one factory only. And the division of these two labor union was caste. So दोनों completely anti थे एक दूसरे. So when, and this was very good, means our factory manager was very happy that we have two labor union because if one goes to the strike, the other will compulsorily come. कि अगर एक oppose कर रहा है तो दूसरा तो जाएगा ही जाएगा. And so in that case, if one says something, the other will definitely oppose it. So in this case, there is no chance that both the labor union will be observing strike. So factory does not close any day. And almost this labor union was following the same caste cleavage that is present in the local region. और उसी के बेसिस पे दो caste groups बने हुए थे, labor union बने हुए थे, that caste identity. So who was getting the advantage? The capitalist class. So the Marxists say that this ethnic identity, division of labor on the basis of ethnic identities, was created during the industrial era because there were certain manual jobs wherein the locals could never be employed. वहाँ पे means factories were not safe or the payment was not that high and regular employment was not there. So people or industrialists could not exploit their own people, the people from their ethnic identity. So what they did, they brought people from different ethnic identity and ranked them. So here in this case, what happened? That these created a pool of labor that could be hired and fired at will. They don't have to give any kind of social security to them. And that's why this ranking actually was created by the capitalists to maintain the status quo, creating a pool of labor that can be hired and fired at will, or to create so much divisions between the labor class they can never unite against the capitalist class. Okay, just like this. So Marxist, how Marxists are saying that how it is dysfunctional in the society. Definitely conflict of functions. They are talking about consensus. So definitely they will be opposite, right? According to W.E.B. Du Bois, ethnicity was used by capitalist class to divide the labors, to prevent any revolution. Okay, next point. This also provided a pool of labor force for the capitalist class that could be hired and fired at will. Okay. So this is the theories of ethnicity stratification, and Though our stratification the change that is race and caste that we'll see in physical anthropology and paper 2 respectively when we'll be seeing covering these topics. Now, the last topic related to stratification is social mobility. So here social mobility means whenever a particular group or an individual changes its position in the hierarchy. Okay? Changes its position in the structure, you can say that. So this is what is called as social mobility. Whenever an individual group changes its position in the social structure, or so sometimes this mobility can be of two types, maybe say horizontal mobility. So horizontal mobility is like changing the position in the social structure, but no effect on rank. So agar suppose there is a labor who is working in the field as a Manrega worker in village, and now he comes to Delhi and work as a daily wage labor in Delhi at some place. So although he has started to work in urban area, but has his position changed, or maybe he might be working as a daily wage labor in some factory. So although he is working in factory, has his position or rank in the overall hierarchy changed? No, but the kind of work that he is doing, or he was doing earlier, and now what he is doing has changed significantly. Earlier he was working on agricultural field, now he is working in a factory. Okay, this is what is called as horizontal mobility. Now there can be other kind of mobility, that is vertical mobility. So here there is a change in the position and also change in the rank. So this vertical mobility can be both upward and downward. So there can be improvement in the rank, there can be a downfall in the rank. So there can be, suppose like there is a person Anil Ambani, who used to be one of the top 10 richest person of the world maybe 5-10 years back, and now he has been officially declared as bankrupt. So that's a case of downward mobility. Okay, that is from the richest person in the world to bankrupt, but nothing to be happy, uski bankruptcy bhi hamari prosperity se bahut zyada hai. Okay, so downward mobility is this case. Then there is a case of upward mobility. So a middle class boy opens a startup, earns like 4 to 5,000 crore maybe in 5-6 years, OYO wala case. So that's a case of upward mobility, the change in rank. Or there can be group mobility. The example that I took was individual mobility. It can be group level also. When a particular caste proclaims its status to be, say, maybe Vaishya are there or Jats are there, and they start proclaiming their status to be Kshatriya. Sensitization. It's a case of vertical mobility and upward mobility of caste groups. Entire group might be moving upwards, or entire group might be moving downwards. Okay, so this is horizontal and vertical. Horizontal means shift in the position but without any change in the rank. Vertical means change in the rank. Okay, and it can be both upward and downward. Second, it can be intragenerational and intergenerational. That is that kind of social mobility that happens in a single generation. That is intragenerational. So for example, एक auto वाले का बेटा या बेटी becomes an IAS officer, or recently that rickshaw चलाने वाली की बेटी, she won some beauty competition. I don't remember the name. So that is an intergenerational, in single generation, or first generation entrepreneurs. They have changed or they have achieved mobility in a singular generation. And the second is the case of mobility that is achieved by cumulative efforts of several generations. It's not that is achieved in a single generation, but that has been achieved by cumulative efforts of several generations. So for example, usually the caste mobility is intergenerational in nature. It takes a lot of time, maybe 20-30 years or several movements to happen. Only then a particular caste will be able to officially proclaim and get it recognized by the fellow groups that their status is higher. Okay, so intergenerational and intergenerational based on time taken. एक generation में हो रहा है तो it is intergenerational, multiple generations, then intergenerational. Then it can be sponsored or contested. So sponsored means by some help, or contested means that you have or one has achieved by through one's own means, not by some external help. So sponsored mobility, the best example is reservation or positive discrimination that is there. So that is not to offend anyone, but it's a sponsored mobility, that you are getting some kind of external help that is giving you the ladder to climb in the hierarchy. But then there is a contested mobility where everybody participate in that competition without any external help, and they are able to achieve mobility. But this contested, it's in itself, it's a you can say very subjective term, because as per the left, there is no contested mobility. Anybody who says he is a first generation entrepreneur actually intentionally ignores the generations of exploitation that has been done on lower caste or the lower rung of the society. So say something like this. Let me give you a story. The story is that a mother had 2 child, 2 लड़के थे उसके, and both were identical, twins. But somehow she loved one of them, only one of them, and she kind of did not love the other one. Maybe there might be some reason. What happened? That the one she loved, she used to take care of him. She used to provide him the best food. She used to provide him the best education. Everything that she could afford to give, she gave to the child she loved. And the other one was ignored. After 20 years, or 25 years of their birth, when both of the children became 25 years old, the mother was very ill, and she realized that she was about to die. Okay, and then she realized that she has committed such a grave sin or such a grave mistake by ignoring one of the child. So she called both the children and apologized to the other child she ignored, and said, "कि मेरे से गलती हो गई, just forgive me. I have realized the mistake that I have made, but now I don't want to commit any mistake. Okay, do one thing. I have 10 lakhs of total property. Now I won't discriminate between you two, and will give 5 lakh to each of you, and you have the equal chance to grow." Okay, this is the story. So do you think at the end mother did the right thing? Why? हाँ? अरे कुछ अपने आपस में मत बोलो, मेरे को बताओ यार. पहले से डिप्राइव था तो उसको ज़्यादा देना चाहिए था. Okay, everybody agrees with this idea? हाँ? Yes or no? No? हाँ बोलो. इक्वालिटी नहीं रहेगी मतलब? मैं तो उसको इतना कुछ मिला और उसका क्या? नहीं तो स्किल्स और क्वालिटीज उसने डेवलप की जिससे वो मतलब 25 साल के बाद भी उसको माँ के पैसे की जरूरत है, इतना तो खर्च हुआ उसके ऊपर वो। So this is something that happened post independence, and this is something that everybody who says the reservation should be abolished are asking the government to do. A caste group or certain caste group who have been deprived from education, from standard quality of living for say thousands of years, and within 70 years of reservation we are asking them कि अब equal करो. And in fact post independence also that we believe कि अब ठीक है आज से हम equal हैं और we will be competing for civil services exam. इसका पेपर कौन establish करेगा? Brahmins in the field of which they are experts because they were the one who had the monopoly over education. So they had this knowledge. तो उन्होंने बोला कि अब compete करेंगे लेकिन किसमें? उस गेम में जिसमें मैं मेरी expertise है and पेपर भी मैं सेट करूंगा और आप लोग पेपर दोगे और इवैल्यूएट भी मैं ही करूंगा, राइट? एंड आप कंपीट करो, अब सब इक्वल है, लेकिन एवरीबडी हैज द इक्वल राइट. अब बोले कोई रिजर्वेशन नहीं होनी चाहिए, इक्वालिटी है, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन आ गया है तो डू यू थिंक दिस इज समथिंग दैट एवरीबडी हु इज सेइंग रिजर्वेशन इज द बेसिक मिनिमम दैट वी कैन डू टू अपलिफ्ट द लोअर कास्ट? मतलब इसके बियॉन्ड भी बहुत कुछ करना है, बट दिस इज द बेसिक मिनिमम दैट हैज टू बी डन. एंड thousands years of deprivation कैन नॉट बी covered or fulfilled only by 70 years of reservation of few seats. Even a survey in 2013 or 14 that was done, 149 total secretaries of the government of India, zero were SCs. Zero. And none of SC has still been able to rise to the position of Chief Justice. This is the current status. So you need to understand that ये जो contested की बात कर रहे हैं, they had generations of monopoly or generation of privilege or tampering, and that's why they have developed a capability right now that they can even participate or think of participating into a contested mobility. So जो लोग generationally deprived हैं, how can they even think of participating? So sponsored mobility is something. They also had the sponsored mobility, but वो अभी visible नहीं है. Okay, that has been you can say latent. क्योंकि उनको generation wise educate किया गया, they have been a part of elite culture. बढ़िया कॉलेज में पढ़ के हैं. उनकी मदर they do not have to go to some houses to wash the clothes or do something like this. They have not been stigmatized. They do not have to fight the abuses of caste. So definitely they have all the means to participate into such kind of competitions compared to the ones who have been generationally deprived. So this is something, a very subjective debate that goes on between left and right. Equality होनी चाहिए, caste खत्म हो जाना चाहिए. उसने बोला कि पहले ये जो generational deprivation किया है उसको खत्म करो and then talk about equality. Okay, so that leads to another debate that is called as debate between equality versus equity. Okay, so we'll deal with it some other time. So these are the three types of social mobility. The first one is horizontal and vertical, intergenerational and sponsored versus contested. Now we'll see the means of social mobility or the avenues of social mobility. Now in the question people raise about abolition of reservation is that they want it to be based on economic criteria, not on caste. EWS in SC. Okay, I have the answer for this as well. So we were talking about President of India, K.R. Narayanan. He was abolished, or sorry, he was prohibited to enter into a temple. Or a MP from Chitradurg district of Karnataka. Sorry, that day I mentioned the wrong name. It is Chitradurg district of Karnataka. Dalit MP. He was not allowed to enter into a temple, or maybe he entered into a temple and the temple was washed. And these kind of instances are happening regularly with SC people or Dalits. Even the case of Tina Dabi, आप लोगों ने सुना होगा. So there was so much of furor on her mark sheet of prelims. Nobody was ready to appreciate that she qualified mains with a very extraordinary score, and everybody was basically projecting कि देखो reservation से prelims qualify कर लिया. She did not get means उसका score general category से थोड़ा सा कम था, and everybody was like, so imagine the people who are at this position also are facing caste based discrimination even now. So जो नहीं है उसके बारे में तो बात ही छोड़ दो. Okay, so if you do that EWS in SC, so what about other SCs who are maybe say एक शायद clerical position पे और SDM की position पे हैं, but next generation will again be reduced to the same position from which they have risen up. वो वापस उसी position पे पहुंच जाएंगे because of the discrimination. So that is happening for I might have told you the story wherein SDM of my area, just because he was a Dalit, उसे glass अलग रखा जाता था because the peon or chaprasi was a Brahmin, and he knew it all, but he could not say anything because of the entire nexus. क्या कहेगा? The entire nexus will not support him. So that is something that they have already accepted. There is a story I might have discussed this. ARC में लिखी हुई story है that government actually wanted. आप लोग को ARC पढ़ने के लिए बोला भी क्या होगा? The government actually wanted that we should send a message to the common public by organizing a common feast wherein the Dalits and the Savarna Jati IAS officers or administrative officers should sit together and consume the lunch or dinner, whatever the feast would be. What actually happened on that day? That the Savarna Jati IAS officers, it's an incident of 60s. They instead suggested that instead of eating together, we will do one thing. We will serve the Dalits. That would send even higher message to the public. देखो Savarna Jati serve कर रही है Dalits को. Now you know the intention behind it. They do not wanted to eat with them, but they could not reject the idea of the government. So instead they suggested कि हम उनको serve कर देंगे. So this is something that is in the mindset even among the people who are in the administrative services. Okay, so ethics is only on paper. ठीक है? People who score usually very high in ethics are the one who know how to manipulate ethics and use it for their advantage. So I hope you get the answer की. हाँ जी. Mindset as if एक बात बताओ कि सिर्फ रिजर्वेशन से ही कास्ट बेस्ड माइंडसेट बना है या कास्ट बेस्ड माइंडसेट ऑलरेडी था? तो व्हाई टू ब्लेम ओनली वन फैक्टर रिजर्वेशन? यस, डेफिनेटली सॉल्यूशन है. आप ये सोचो ना कि इफ रिजर्वेशन इज काइंड ऑफ इंप्रूविंग द स्टेटस ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर ग्रुप और एक पर्टिकुलर पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, द स्टेटस ऑफ एनी पर्टिकुलर कास्ट इज इंप्रूव्ड. स्टेटस मींस स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ लिविंग इज गुड, wherein they do not have to compete with other castes for basic amenities. Why do they need reservation? Why are not Punjabis or Sikh fighting for reservation? Why are not Jains fighting for reservation? Why are not Parsis fighting for reservation? They are minorities, but still not fighting for reservation कि हमें भी 2% सीट दो या 1% सीट दो. Never. You will never find the Sikh, even in UP, like the Sikh community has got OBC status. कई सारे caste but nobody even मतलब pays any attention कि जाके कोई certificate बनवा लो या कुछ भी ऐसा कर लो. Nothing like that. Why? It's because they are well off. It's because they do not have to. They are not stigmatized. That is, social respect is also there, and second, they do not have to fight for the basic amenities. So automatically, when these kind of needs are satisfied, there is no need for, or जब वो national identity will be doing or giving these kind of benefits to the people, they do not have to ascribe to this kind of caste identities. Most of the times, caste identities is not something that rises from below. It starts from above only. Stigmatization, deprivation, oppression, exploitation from top, and then a reaction comes from below. Okay, so it should be, अगर इसको हटाना भी है तो it should be mutual rather than reservation हटाने से nothing is going to happen like this. Okay. So it should be modified. I'm not saying the policy here that is completely perfect. The solution is not to remove it, maybe to bring some changes. Yeah, that's a flaw. Definitely, it's a flaw. The government should start working on it. But the solution again is not the removal of reservation, modification of it. So इसमें तो कोई बड़ी बात है नहीं. Yes, definitely that's an agreed point. There is some kind of deprivation, there is some kind of flaw in implementation of the policies. तो उसमें आप change लेके आओ. No, पता है तो SC में creamy layer का concept हो ही नहीं सकता, because you are again taking the point that deprivation is on the basis of economy. The deprivation is never on the basis of economic status. The deprivation is on the basis of their social identity. तो आप creamy non-creamy की बात ही छोड़ दो. Okay, OBC में creamy non-creamy works, SC में creamy non-creamy का कोई logic नहीं बनता. ST में still can work because they are outside the caste. So ST में it can work creamy non-creamy. Okay, but SC में कभी नहीं. It's illogical to go for creamy non-creamy because deprivation creamy वालों का भी उतना है जितना non-creamy का है. So avenues of social mobility, ये कभी future में बात करेंगे. It's very politically sensitive topic. So in traditional societies, there were certain kinds of avenues. So first one is geographical mobility. Geographical mobility. So you'll see that people would go to some place, claim themselves to be Kshatriya or say Brahmin, and there is no identity card. So कि आधार है जिसको इंटरनेट पे चेक कर लिया. Okay, आधार है इंटरनेट पे चेक कर लिया, उसकी आइडेंटिटी वेरीफाई कर लिया, सेंसस इज देयर, समथिंग लाइक दैट. सो आई माइट हैव टोल्ड यू द स्टोरी ऑफ रामचरितमानस. People remembered it orally and they started migrating to with their family to some villages. वहां पे जाकर रामचरितमानस गाने लगे. So people thought some Brahmin or some pandit from some other village might have come and they started treating him as like Brahmin. Okay, or there were a group of people who might go and inhabit a new village. Maybe 10-12 लोग चले गए और inhabit किया और उन्होंने वहां से अपनी आइडेंटिटी प्रूव की that we are the Brahmins. Started पूरा अपना external appearance would have changed, the practices would have changed, and people would, and they would have taken some new unique surnames. So multiple caste groups came like this. For example, in Maharashtra you will see that there are certain Brahmins who use their village name as their surnames. You must know that Mangeshkar. So मंगेश गांव के रहने वालों को मंगेशकर, तेंदुलकर गांव के रहने वाले गावस्कर. So these people, they have attached the name of their village and they all are Brahmins. Okay, and it's believed that these people, they might have migrated to certain place, proclaimed their status as Brahmin and inhabited a particular village. So मंगेश गांव के Brahmin, तेंदुल गांव के Brahmin, or whatever. So these kind of Wadekar, Suresh Wadekar. So these are the name of the villages that they have used to claim the status as Brahmin. So geographical mobility was one of the most prominent means for social mobility. The second one was patronage. So patronage by certain kings, rulers, might have raised the position of a particular caste group. So एक particular caste group is there called as कायस्थ. So आप में से कायस्थ है कोई? Anyone? Srivastavs usually, Srivastava, Saxena, they are called as कायस्थ and they proclaim their status to be equivalent to Brahmins. But these are not a homogeneous group of people. They were the ones who were scribes in the courts. Scribes का मतलब जो court proceedings को लिखते थे. And due to the patronage of the rulers, they started calling themselves as कायस्थ, a distinct caste, and equated themselves with respect to Brahmin. But ask them कि किस वर्ण को belong करते हैं, तो there is no clear-cut answer that which varna they belong to. Are they Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra? None. Outside the varna system, but equivalent to Brahmin in rank. The only reason is patronage of the rulers. Okay. Next is the renunciation. Renunciation is one of the most easy mechanism, or that was the mechanism available for the people belonging to any caste group for social mobility. तो बहुत सारे डाकू हुए जो renunciate होके संत हो गए. और there, yes, हाँ, so you know the name. And there were a lot of lower caste people, जुलाहा हुए, and संत के नाम से जाने. जुलाहा means the tailors or जो weavers, sorry, not the tailors. So, or several other lower caste people who basically renunciated their way of life and were accepted as Brahmin or saints in Hindu religion. Okay, so here this is a case of individual social mobility. By renunciation, the lower caste people would be identified as saints or Brahmins, equivalent to Brahmins, or even more purer than the Brahmins. Okay, then acquiring political power. So several caste groups, when they were able to acquire political powers, they started claiming their status to be Kshatriya. The best example is Mauryas. Okay, so it is believed that, or as per the historical records, they were very low caste people belonging to Maurya's caste. And once they were able to establish their kingdom, they started claiming their status to be Kshatriya. Okay, and several, although it is believed, historically proven, that Nandas used to be, or Nandas were the last true Kshatriya to rule India. After that, all the Hindu kingdoms, they although claimed their status to be Kshatriya, but they were not true Kshatriya. They, after gaining the power, claimed or proclaimed their status to be Kshatriya. That was a way. Once they acquired political power, they started claiming their status to be Kshatriya. That was a way of social mobility. Okay, so these were the mechanisms available in the traditional societies. अरे वो खुद ही रूलर थे, वो अपने आप को कैसे पेट्रोनाइज करेंगे? They acquired political power. Nandas के बाद वाले, actually Nandas were the true Kshatriya, last true Kshatriya. Then the modern societies. The first one is democracy. So by numbers, a particular caste will be able to acquire political power, dominant caste. Education system. Education कर लो, US return, US में Massachusetts से पढ़ के आओ, California Institute and all that. If you get that degree, Nobody is going to ask the caste. Then several rise of secular jobs, occupational roles, or several secular jobs that were distinct from caste roles. Say investment banker, software engineer. This is not related to any caste. Okay, and these secular jobs were highly remunerating in nature. In fact, the dominant caste group or the higher caste group also wanted to claim or a place in these kind of jobs. Okay, so these occupational roles that started to rise in the modern period. Then another phenomena, although this is not prevalent right now, but it was something that helped in social mobility in the British period, that is census. So जो काम geographical mobility was doing in the traditional society, census was doing in the British period. 1870s में census started, and people in the first census were asked their caste. They used to wait for every census so that they can get their name recorded with an alternative surname. और फिर उसके बाद से after 5 years the government record will call them or will give them an I card with that particular surname, और उसकी caste change हो गई. So census was a mechanism that was used by several caste groups to rise upward in the hierarchy. Okay, next one, welfare state, positive discrimination. अरे कोई बात नहीं, आराम से खास लो यार, कोई बात नहीं. ऐसे से क्या फायदा होगा मतलब? What water? So welfare state, due to welfare state, the kind of policies that were created by states, so several groups were able to rise or change their position due to certain policies, maybe due to some kind of positive discrimination, maybe due to some kind of industrial policies. Certain industries, MSMEs were promoted, and a particular group of caste who were specializing in those kind of businesses, they were able to. So there is a caste called as Nonial in UP. So they were usually earlier the salt makers, and then lower caste people. And during Second World War, they got a lot of contracts in road making, and they were able to. बाद में उन्होंने अपना caste status claim किया क्षत्रिय की तरह. Okay, then Jatovs, I might have discussed this case of Jatovs, Agra. So they were expert or leather shoes made, and when Britishers came, the market was opened. They earned a lot of money, claimed their status to be Kshatriya. Okay, so these are the modern mechanism for social mobility. So this is all about social stratification, and that's it for today. A last topic is there for Unit 2.2, that is socialization. Okay, and symbolic interactionism. We'll be talking about it in the next class. Thank you so much.